Hello everyone, how's it going? Billy Ballgame here, back with another video. On this channel, I'm just a dude who loves to talk about baseball cards. And on today's video, I'm going to give kind of a follow-up on my last video where I was talking about how sometimes cards that aren't rare can be difficult to find. And then that will just take a little bit of time. I wanted to give you some feedback on the comments I've received from you all on that video. And then after that, I'm going to make fun of the Yankees and Yankees fans. Now, wait a minute. Don't stop the video. Don't type a bunch of hate in the comments. And please do not unsubscribe to my channel. This is all going to be in fun. As far as me talking smack about the Yankees and Yankees fans, I have a lot of respect for them and the franchise, but I have a little bit of jealousy as a Cardinals fan, so I'll dive into that here in a minute. But first, I wanted to kind of, again, touch base on some of the feedback I've gotten in the comments from last week's video. So I made what some of you may consider an absolutely absurd point, and there's probably some validity to that if that is your opinion. But the main point I was trying to make is that a lot of the cards from, I focused mainly on the 80s, but we could even back that up into the 70s. A lot of these cards are not rare. They are not hard to find, especially if they came from the junk wax era, right? Like they're everywhere. And you could even bring that forward into the 90s and even the early 2000s. So these cards are not difficult to find, but I have trouble finding them in high grades that are nice centered examples of that card. And I sometimes have a hard time finding them priced reasonably. And for the vast majority of my comments, you guys have experienced the same thing. And I think what I've picked up on is that a lot of it is regional. So if you live on the East Coast, close to Baltimore, you'll be able to find all kinds of Cal Ripken cards in high grades, nice centered copies, stuff like that. But I had another comment from a guy that is a Tony Gwynn collector, and I can't remember where he lives, and I apologize. But he was saying that he's been collecting Tony Gwynn for, I think, over 20 years, and it is extremely difficult for him to find high-graded examples of Tony Gwynn rookie cards with good eye appeal, just because, again, so many of them were poorly produced and are off-centered, not nice copies of the card. And I think that that was a very common flaw with cards in the 70s and the 80s, and of course it got better as the 80s went along. But you can still find a lot of cards from, the 90s and the early 2000s, and heck, even now, that are off-centered. So sometimes a rare card can have a bit of conditional rarity that goes along with that card just because of the manufacturing process. And yeah, so thank you for your feedback on that video. I'm glad to see that I'm not the only one that has noticed this. And again, I appreciate your support and appreciate your feedback in the comments. And if you're back with me on this channel and you're not subscribed, if you would, please do so. I would really appreciate that. And give the video a like. And I've really tried to do a better job of actually engaging in comments instead of just saying, hey, thanks for watching and commenting. Like, I try to do what I can to get kind of some conversation going in the comments. I just try to make it a little more interactive with you all. I think I've done a better job on that, but I still have room to improve. All right, so to the meat of today's topic. Now, on a previous video, I touched base on how the Yankees fans are a huge percentage of the vintage baseball collecting community in YouTube and what good dudes they all are. And there are a lot of them, and it makes sense because of the population of New York. The Yankees, the most storied franchise in Major League Baseball history. But from time to time, I feel outnumbered. No, I'm just kidding. So the Cardinals have won the second most World Series in Major League Baseball at 11. And I'm not going to tell you anything that any of you don't know already. This is just kind of off the cuff, me being a little bit maybe obnoxious or goofy. This is just intended to be fun. And please don't read anything more into that. So the Cardinals have won 11 World Series, and our last World Series was in 2011. The Cardinals have not been very good in the last few years, and looks like with the decline of Arenado and Goldschmidt that we may not be good for some time in the future. So I'm trying to kind of purge my lifelong hatred of the Kansas City Royals. And with that, I'm also trying to purge some of my lifelong hatred for some of the other teams in baseball, because I'm older now. I'm not 12 years old. I can appreciate teams for the players and for their history. And that's part of the purpose in today's video. And again, I'm going to talk some smack about the Yankees and maybe on Yankees fans, but I don't mean it in a malicious way. It's all for fun, at least for me anyway. I hope you all think it's fun too. But the Yankees have won 27 World Series. Now, again, I just said the Cardinals have won 11. The Cardinals have won the second most World Series in Major League Baseball. The Yankees more than double the Cardinals' World Series championships. And that's amazing to me. So a lot of this comes from jealousy, because I would like the Cardinals to have 27 World Series championships. And the Cardinals have some amazing players that are highly regarded in the history of baseball. Sorry, the fam is coming in, so hopefully the dogs don't bark or anything. But so Stan Musial, Rogers Hornsby, Bob Gibson, Albert Pujols, Ozzie Smith. Like, the Cardinals have had great players throughout its history. Johnny Mize, Ducky Medwick, Dizzy Dean, like the list goes on. And as a Cardinals fan, I'm fortunate. I always talk about how Cardinals are undervalued, but what that means for me is I can pick up their cards pretty cheap relative to their position in baseball history for specific players, Musial for an example. Now, again, the Yankees have won 27 World Series. And when you just think about some of the great players throughout Yankees history, they are some of the biggest names in baseball history and some of the biggest names within the hobby. And I feel for Yankees fans because there's a Yankee tax. Basement card collector, Keith, commented in my last video that he has to pay a Yankees tax. And I agree with that 100%. And I'm going to show you my Mickey Mantle cards today as an example of paying a Yankees tax. But I would love to have Babe Ruth cards. I would love to have Lou Gehrig cards, Joe DiMaggio. Like, those are some of the, and Mickey Mantle, more Mickey Mantle cards. Those are four of the biggest names in the hobby that are, you know, of course, historic players on the Yankees and all-time greats within baseball, but their cards are really expensive. And so a certain part of me feels for Yankees fans, because if you want to collect the all-time Yankee greats, like, you're going to pay a premium for those guys, and they are definitely going to come with a tax. I'm going to move this camera back a little bit so I don't have quite such a shadow on my face. Maybe I should completely cover my face. Maybe this video would be better if I did that. So a certain part of me feels for Yankee fans being a collector. Like, I can buy Ozzie Smith rookies cheap. I can buy Albert Pujols rookies cheap. Bob Gibson and Stan Musial are a little bit more expensive, but relative to their position of all-time greats within baseball, they're pretty affordable, especially when you compare them to, Stan Musial and some of those guys, DiMaggio, like even Derek Jeter is expensive. So there's definitely a Yankee tax that comes with that. And again, there are a lot of Yankees fans on YouTube, and they're some of the best dudes that I've met within the YouTube card community. And again, I just named a few: Rocket Rick J, Lou Rock TV, Greg from Midlife Cards, Darren from Return to Collecting, Orlando from A Collector's Dream. Like, there are more of them. I can go on and on and on. And I kind of made a joke about how they're taking over the YouTube community, and I'm sick of it, and I'm not going to take it anymore. But it makes sense, right? Because they're the most storied franchise in the history of baseball, and they happen to be in New York, which is one of the biggest cities in the country. When you compare New York to St. Louis, it just makes sense that there would be way more Yankees fans out there. But I like to give Yankees fans a hard time because it's fun to mess with them. Like, I've made comments before. It's like telling a comic book guy that Batman isn't a superhero. So, like, I just like to talk smack about Derek Jeter. I like to call Mickey Mantle overrated. And I don't believe any of that. I just like to get Yankees fans fired up because it's fun. But really, it's just I appreciate them and appreciate and respect the Yankees franchise. And so I like to give them a hard time, but then eventually, after I get them fired up, I'll tell them I'm kidding. Just like I do with Batman and superhero fans when I tell them that Batman isn't a superhero. Like, I have no skin in that game. I'm not a comic book guy, right? So the Yankees history and the Cardinals histories kind of have a few parallels, though, even though the Yankees have 27 World Series championships compared to the Cardinals 11. The Yankees and the Cardinals, for the most part, have been good and bad at pretty close to the same time. So, the Cardinals were winning a lot of their championships in the 40s, and then they won a few in the 60s. And guess what? So did the Yankees. The Cardinals weren't great in the 70s and 80s after Whitey Ball. And so really the late 80s and early 90s, mid to even late 90s, the Cardinals weren't very good. And the Yankees went through a time there in the 70s and 80s where they weren't great either. Leading up into the 90s when, they had Derek Jeter and Bernie Williams and their catcher, his name escapes me off the top of my head. But the Yankees had some really good teams and some really good players, David Cohn and David Wells, Boomer. So the Yankees had some good teams in the 90s, but as a Cardinals fan, we didn't really have much to root for throughout the 90s except for, Mark McGwire's home run chase. So there's definitely some parallels between the Yankees and the Cardinals. The Yankees just historically have done it better than the Cardinals have. So I'll give you some examples of paying a Yankees tax. And I'm trying to think of jokes and ways to make fun of Yankees fans, but really I can't do it right now. Other than the fact that a lot of them tend to wear their hat backwards for some reason. I don't know. I'm kidding. Could you see Rocket Rick J wearing his hat backwards? I don't think that's ever been a thing. And I'm kidding. So again, I love Rocket Rick J. All these guys that I mentioned, like, they're awesome dudes. I got to hang out with them all a little bit at the National, and they're great dudes to be around. So I'm going to show my Mantle. So like I said, I would love to be able to afford more Mickey Mantle cards. I would love to afford some Babe Ruth cards and some Lou Gehrig cards and some DiMaggio cards. And are there some out there that I can afford of those guys? Yeah, there are a few. But they're cheaper for a reason. A lot of the times, like the Sanella Margarine Babe Ruth, like, it's a cool picture. an awesome illustration, painting, whatever you want to call it. But I don't speak German, and you flip the card over on the back, and it's in German, even though I don't think it was produced in Germany. I think it was produced in Brussels or somewhere around there. But I don't speak German, and I like to read the backs of cards, so I would have to Google Translate what the back of that card says. So the case could be made that that's one of the cheaper, if not the cheapest, Ruth cards because it's his worst card. Let's see, the Burke Ross DiMaggio, like I can afford that. And it's not a bad card, but I don't think the argument could be made that it's his best card. And at this point in time, I'm not aware of a single Gehrig card that I really could afford without paying more than $2,000 for and basically, spending 6-8 months worth of baseball card allowance to afford it. Now, Musial is a little bit more or not Musial, Mantle is a little bit more affordable, but when you compare him to the other greats from his era, like he, for the most part, doubles them in price. As you all know, I'm working on the 60 top set, even though I haven't really been working on it a whole lot here recently. I'm having a hard time pointing to it, but yeah, it's over there. If you compare the Mantle in that set to Aaron and Mays, Mantle is like double the price of those guys. And I'm fortunate to have the Mantle. I don't have the Mays and the Aaron, their regular cards yet, but they're about in the $200 to $300 range for 5s and 6s, whereas the Mantle is almost $700 for a 5 and about $1,000 for a 6, if not higher. So again, Mantle is expensive. And a big part of that is because he's a Yankee. But if all the Yankees fans got together at the same time and said, you know what, we're not buying any Mantle or Ruth or Gehrig or any of those guys, we're not buying any of those cards for a year, those prices would come down and then we could all afford to buy them. So if you Yankees fans weren't so dedicated to the Yankees and all the all-time great Yankees players, like, you wouldn't have to pay that Yankee tax. So maybe we could all collude together and conspire to drive the prices of these all-time Yankee greats down so we can all afford to buy them. And maybe we'll just take turns. Like, okay, it's Lou Rock, it's your month. Go out and buy a bunch of Mickey Mantle cards. Okay, Darren, never mind. Darren already has them all. Greg, that was a joke, by the way. Greg, it's your month. Go out and buy whoever, right? And we'll just take turns and we'll rotate through, and then that way we can all get them for cheap. And then we'll buy up all the supply and drive the demand back up. I'm joking. But I picked up a Mantle here recently, and this is really the cheapest Mantle that I can think of, and this is going to tie into collecting on a budget. So this is the 64 Topps Giants, and this is in a 6, and I paid $130 for it. And other than this one, and is it the 68 or 69 Topps Game, like, these are the only Mantles that you're going to be able to find in mid-grades that I can think of off the top of my head for less than $400 or $500. Like, once he gets later into the 60s, his 68 and 69 Topps card get cheaper, but that's toward the end of his career, and they're still pricey. So if you want to collect Mantle cards on a budget, like, look for this one. Look for his Topps Giants. Look for his Topps Game, and you can find those cards relatively cheap compared to a lot of the other Mantle cards. Look to buy his league leader cards. Those are going to be more expensive than a regular league leader card just because Mantle is on it, but they can still be relatively affordable. In the 5 or 6 range, you're going to be in the $100 to $200 range for any Mickey Mantle leader card. Another example you can look for is his combo cards, and this is a card that I picked up from my buddy Coop on the way back from the National. And I love these combo cards. Like, there are 3 Hall of Famers on this card. And so a lot of league leader cards and a lot of combo cards, they're going to have multiple Hall of Famers or multiple stars. Like, they're just great cards. And for a long time, the hobby did not like them. Like, you can look in the Beckett's from back in the day, and a lot of those cards were crazy cheap for what they are. And they've gone up in price. I think they've found more appreciation within the hobby, and I think that's a good thing. But they still lag far behind the regular cards in price, depending on who's on it. Like, this card is more expensive than Harmon Killebrew's 1968 Topps card, obviously, because it's got Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle on it. So those two make it more expensive, and rightfully so. And another thing to look at possibly would be his All-Star cards, because they are also cheaper than his regular cards. And so when I compare this one, this is his 60 Topps All-Star card from the 60 set. This card now is valued at about $225, $250 for a 5 from a 1960 Topps set. And this is a gorgeous card. Now, again, that's a little bit expensive, but I think that that would be affordable for most collectors, even if you're on a smaller budget and you want a Mickey Mantle card and think that you can't afford one. Look for his All-Star cards and go, if $200 is a lot for you, go later in his career, they'll be cheaper, or go with lower grades. They would also be cheaper. My guess is you could get this in a 2 or 3 for, in the $100 range. And I think even if you have a $20 a month budget and the discipline, you can save up, $100 to buy a Mickey Mantle All-Star card. And another combo card that I just love because it's got one of my favorite Cardinals on there is Mantle and Ken Boyer. This is also out of the 60 set. This is in a PSA 5. This card is less than $100. I think it's around $70, $80 right now. But again, it's just an awesome card of two of the greatest players from the, mid 50s to mid 60s in that range. And then here is his regular card from the 60 set. And again, this is a little bit more expensive, but if you go to his cards from 68 and 69, those can be had for reasonably cheap compared to the rest of his cards. And this one has come down quite a bit since I bought it. This one is about probably $650 or so, in that ballpark right now. And again, this is a gorgeous card. If you can't afford to fork out $650 for a card, look at a lower grade. As a matter of fact, I picked up a 64 Topps Mickey Mantle at the National in a 1.5 for, I think it was $100, because I was trying to do that flip up challenge with Coop. And it was really off-centered, but you could find a better centered version of that card for probably, $120, $150, somewhere in that ballpark, and it'll still be a way nice card. So, I feel for Yankees fans, but at the same time I don't, because you've won 27 World Series. You have some of the greatest players in the history of baseball played for that franchise. And in all reality, you have one of, if not the best player in baseball currently active in Aaron Judge. He is making another run at 60 home runs this year. And he's tailed off a little bit recently. I noticed his average has dropped about 20 points or so. And it seems like he's been hanging out right around 51, 52 home runs for a while. And you guys probably have, 15 games or so left of the season. He could go on a tear and end up with 60 home runs still. He's probably not going to break his record again, but, man, it's got to be an exciting time to be a Yankees fan. They're going to make the playoffs. The Cardinals aren't. And you have Aaron Judge making another run at, 60 home runs potentially. So it's got to be a good time to be a Yankees fan. And I'm a little bit jealous. And I hope that the Cardinals can turn things around here before too long and maybe see a playoff again and maybe see a World Series because, man, we've gone, 13 years without a World Series now. And that's a long time for us. Maybe we're blessed too. But it's got to be good to be a Yankees fan, and thank God I was born a Cardinals fan. But I think I'm going to wrap it up at that. I didn't get to put out as much brevity or witty banter as I would have liked to because I can't think of ways to make fun of you guys, and I can't think of ways to make fun of the Yankees. I wish I could, but I've got nothing. So if you're still with me, I appreciate you watching the video. I appreciate your support of the channel. If you're not already, once again, please subscribe. Give this video a like. It would be greatly appreciated. And until the next one, I hope everybody has a good one, and I'll talk to you later.